We finally arrived at the end of the year, and before I continue the video, I would like to wish you all a happy Christmas. And if you do not celebrate Christmas, well, happy holidays. And if for some reason you don't get any holidays, well, happy rest of the day? Anyways, I hope you have a fantastic time with your family and friends, despite how shit this year has been. But at the time this video is uploaded, I went back to my home country, so there will be no weekly anime news as you saw last week, and this one included. But if you had joined my Discord server, you would know by now, so if you have not done so, please go check out my Discord channel, Keka's Little Corner, link in the description. But enough stalling, let's get on to the video. Despite the ups and downs, I did watch a lot of anime this season, so this list might be a little bit long. And in today's video, I'll be going through all the anime I've watched, giving you some brief thoughts, and finishing off by giving you my top 3 anime for this season. This video will obviously contain spoilers, so if you don't want to be spoiled, I'll leave timestamps in the description. Before I start with the list, I would like to announce that I won't be taking into consideration animes like Jujutsu Kaisen as well as the new Higurashi TV anime, simply because these two have 24 episodes each, therefore they'll be airing at least until the end of February. But from what I've seen, I'd probably put Jujutsu Kaisen at the top 3 for obvious reasons. This anime is amazing, from the fighting scenes to the story, and the action with amazing animation and art style, and how by well adapted it really is from the manga. As for Higurashi, since it is a sort of remake with small details without adding anything new, at least for what we've seen so far, personally I prefer the original anime from 10 years or so ago. So yeah, I guess we're gonna have to wait and see. So to start off the list we have Majo no Tabitabi, or The Journey of Elena. I will skip this anime since I've made an entire video dedicated to this show, so if you want to hear my thoughts about it, link is in the description. Next we have Hyakuman no Inochi no e ni ore wa Tatteiru. I'll be brief about this anime. This show is very underwhelming even for isekai standards, since it follows a pretty generic plot, using some RPG elements for our main characters to progress through the story. Not only we are dealing with a very generic plot, but also a very predictable one, especially if we take a look at the way the anime is heading story-wise. I was quite interested in the beginning about the whole concept of using unusual roles such as being a farmer or a cook in a fantasy setting, but the lack of real struggle to overcome the obstacles for Yusuke was nothing more than a fluke in my opinion. One positive aspect I have to talk about is the main character's background and how their personal problems in their real lives is a plot point to strengthen their friendship, and for me, I believe it gave them some depth to their personality. On a more technical standpoint, the animation was average and even the character's design were quite mediocre, especially Yusuke, with a very bland art style similar to your generic main character one may find in any isekai. Next on this list we have Senyoku no Sigrdrifa. Now this anime had a lot of potential in my opinion, due to its unusual premise. Yes, the main characters are essentially cute girls, but the setting revolving around gods, Valkyries, and the whole shebang about saving the world while using aircraft was something you don't see every day. And to be quite frank, I kind of enjoy that idea. Nevertheless, my main issue with this kind of anime is that it needs to have substantial character design, and here all we had were boring characters with cliché personalities, especially Claudia. Some episodes in the beginning were very repetitive, like the main characters go and fight some monsters, everything ends well, and they head back to the base, and then repeat. The story pacing sometimes was all over the place, especially when a certain plot point would be introduced. One of the main characters would receive a quote-unquote random character development boost, and then moving on to another plot point. I believe this anime could have been better if the characters had a proper character development pacing, and that is quite the issue when you have original anime and 12 episodes format. The plot and its pacing can become easily inconsistent and everything seems to lose a proper cohesion. Next up, we have Mahouka Koukou no Rettousei, the second season. I honestly don't understand why I watched the second season even after really disliking the first one. I don't know, maybe I was trying to give it a chance? But unfortunately I simply cannot come to like this anime due to various reasons. First off, the weird relationship between siblings. Sorry to say, but for me it is bottom line weird, and don't get me wrong, I totally respect those of you who don't mind this kind of relationship, but the weird part for me is how Miyuki sees her brother, because she truly likes him, more than just a brother, whereas her brother Tatsuya genuinely likes his sister, well, because it's his sister. and he generally wants to protect her, and this quote-unquote misunderstanding between feelings makes me cringe a little bit. Now the story itself seems to be quite interesting. A lot of political aspects are centered around the show, and the whole talk about magic power, which is something I really enjoy. The season seemed to have somewhat a better structure, and I believe it didn't suffer from the inconsistent story pacing we saw in the first season, or at least how I felt about the first season. The same issue persists, however, with the main characters themselves being really superficial, especially Tatsuya looking like a completely emotionless individual whilst being overpowered, of course. The animation was, however, very consistent, and I believe it is the strongest aspect I have to praise about the irregular at the Magic High School. So I hope we can come across a change in Tatsuya's personality later down the road in order to shake him up a little bit with a bit of tension and plot thickening. Next up we have Kuma Bear. I'll make this one short, as this is yet again another boring plot where someone goes into a virtual world and nothing really happens. But for some reason I kept on watching it. I think I always expect something to happen, but I do believe this anime kind of falls into the same issue as Bofuri did, in my opinion. For it being a slice of life anime where nothing really happens and you have some cute girls doing cute things with an OP main character in the mix, and voila. Something boring and generic. The positive aspect about this anime compared to Bofuri is that our main character isn't as bland, and here we have a main character that seems to lack something in real life and tries to balance her own personal issues through escapism, making new friendships in a virtual world. But there's obviously more to it. We barely got any background from our main character, which is unfortunate to say the least, but at the same time we kind of get to understand that she's missing something in her own personal life, but the way it is presented is somewhat ambiguous, hence the reason I have some mixed feelings about it. Maybe if there's a second season, we get to understand the bigger picture about this anime. Of course it has a lot of goofy aspects and a lot of comedic scenes, with Yuna being dressed as a bear, and the whole thing about building bear-looking houses, and also the wholesome scenes where she genuinely wants to help out people, especially the kids. I think her real life issues, especially in the first episode when we saw Yuna talking with her mother, hence the reason she somewhat wants to fill that gap, being kind to kids, taking the role of her own mother and doing as much as she can for the kids as we saw in the anime. I think that's her main issue with her personal life, but I hope this anime can clarify that with the second season so that we can better understand what is going on. Next up we have Maoujou de Oyasumi. I did an initial thoughts video about this anime, you can check it out if you wish, link in the description, and I have to say that my first impressions maintained. This anime is very funny and wholesome, and I totally recommend it to anyone that wants to have a quick laugh from start to finish. Next up, let's talk about KAMISAMA ni Natta Hi. If you know the one responsible for writing the story and his previous works, you can kind of expect a huge drama story. I've also made a first impressions video on Kamisama, again, link in the description. But to Clanat or Angel Beats, Kamisama was not as good as those mentioned, in my opinion, simply because of how the characters here were more simplistic, and despite the mystery around Hina, I did not feel any sense of real tension or any real build-up. Some episodes were fillers instead of focusing on perhaps the different story plot points, or focusing on giving depth to certain aspects of the story like Ina's background, making it concise at the same time, and I believe that 12 episodes was simply not enough for this story. I'm not saying that I did not enjoy or it was bad, okay, it's simply due to the high expectations I had for Jun Maeda's personal record. It came as a big disappointment if we compare to previous shows. Moving on to Haikyuu to the top, the second season. Now, I may get a lot of hate for this, but I believe they are stretching Haikyuu's story a bit too much for my taste, and I believe it is taking a bit too long in order to have a proper story progression. Even though I really enjoyed this season, these last 12 episodes are almost fully dedicated to one match between Karasuno and Inarizaki. I say almost because we see 2 or 3 episodes that are focused in Nekoma's high school match, and that is for me something that is lacking in the anime. I personally want to see more about other teams and other characters, and this season we started to see more besides Karasuno's team, but as per usual, the way the show is presented has been once again very consistent and coherent. We have seen more about these kids' background, about their struggles, emphasizing on the human behaviors in general, and how they have grown and still keep on growing. In that regard, I do not have any complaints, but I believe if they could summarize the events a little bit more, it would be perfect for my taste. But that's just my opinion. The animation was once again spot on and I have no complaints about it. Next, there's Assault Lily Bouquet. Now this anime screams deja vu, as we have seen similar premises many times. This show isn't bad because the story itself is interesting. The art style from these female characters is, in my opinion, very cute, hence the reason I enjoyed seeing a bunch of girls fighting monsters together. However, there are certain aspects about this show I found really annoying, like Riri as a character. Not only she's very generic, but also borderline irritating to watch and to hear. I do not have any complaints nor anything against the voice actress, but her voice was very annoying. Not only that, but some scenes between Riri and Yuyu were cringy as hell. Doing some weird poses and movements of intimacy between them were also very unnatural. The amount of main characters were also a big problem for me, since we could not get a clear picture of who was important and who wasn't, considering we have 9 main characters. But for a 12-episode TV show, I believe this anime was average at its best, but very unoriginal, unfortunately, since I had high hopes for it. But the animation, especially the fighting scenes, were nevertheless very well made, so I did find this show still quite entertaining to watch, despite its flaws. Next, we have Akudama Drive. Now this anime came as a very positive surprise for me. I was not expecting this anime to be as good as I thought it would be. So to start off, the premise itself is very well thought out, having top tier criminals doing a dirty job and pretty much install chaos in the big city in order to complete a mission. But going beyond the job itself, this anime was able to convey a society of pure manipulation of the human being, characterizing the different human behaviors and the ability to control a population through religious beliefs and through a totalitarian system, quite similar to the Book of 1984 in that regard. As one may expect, this show has a deep lore that isn't explored enough, unfortunately, but it goes deep into humans' darkest secrets and all the manipulation through a hierarchical system, quite often giving importance to the aspect of society's behavior, similar to that of a sheep that needs to follow the leader without questioning. Of course, except to Akudama, aka the top criminals. They are the outlaws of society, and to be honest, they are those who behave in the most human way, ironically. This group of Akudama are quote-unquote forced to take this job of rescuing 2 kids who have been victims of incredibly unhuman experiments, hence the reason they've become immortal. And the majority of this show is about their rescue. We have on our hand a cast of Akudama, each of them with their own background, even though it isn't very well explored due to the episode restrictions. The animation, as well as the overall design, is top-notch, no wonder because it is made by Studio Pierrot, which has quite the history record of making TV shows with amazing animation. Again, this anime was very well made for a 12-episode format, and I totally recommend it if you have not seen it yet. Last on our list, we have Danmachi, the 3rd season. I was surprised by this season's arc because the story broke its shell of being all about dungeon exploring, and we finally got to see more about the monsters' own background and their relationship with humans, with, the introduction of Vine that served pretty much as a plot trigger for the whole arc. However, even though the idea was good, the execution was unfortunately far from being decent, in my opinion. There's a lot of exposition in the story as a means to create tension between these 2 realms, monsters and humans, which then is followed by a lot of violence, as we saw towards the end of the show, which led to creatures to emerge to the surface and bring chaos to the city, only to see our main character Belle to be the quote-unquote ambassador of monsters, trying to make them coexist and be nice to each other, which for me is a kind of lazy and cliche way to give some sort of importance to a main character who's not suited to this kind of job, personally. Now, don't get me wrong, I really enjoy Danmachi's universe and the concept of having different families and their fights, but I believe this season was poorly executed. I did enjoy the relationship between Vel and Vine, emphasizing on how certain monsters and humans can indeed cohabitate, but the reality is far from what we are shown. Many monsters are irrational, and humans have this stereotypical misconception about monsters being stupid and incapable of having feelings or being as intelligent as humans, and this ideal was nothing more than an illusion, making this arc a huge disappointment. Maybe I'm being a bit harsh on Danmachi, but I believe this show has become mediocre ever since the 2nd season began, presenting good ideas but badly executing them, always unable to emerge as something unique and relevant, making yet again an underwhelming arc. But what do you think? Give me your thoughts about this anime in the comments below. And with all of these anime shows I've seen, my top 3 anime for the fall season will be Majo no Tabitabi, Maoujou de Oyasumi, and Akudama Drive. Again, if Jujutsu Kaisen would have been finished by now, I would put it on the top 3, but since it's still airing and will continue for months to come, I'll simply put it in between brackets since I strongly believe this show deserves a spot in the list, but it would be unfair to compare it to shows that are pretty much over. That will be it for today's video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Next week I'll be going through my top 3 picks from each season of 2020 and pick my final 3 anime for the entire year, so stay tuned for that. This Sunday, the weekly anime news are coming back, so stay tuned for that as well, and don't forget to watch your daily dose of anime because it's good for your brain and heart. Take care, and I'll see y'all in the next video.